Hey, happy Monday. How's it going, Greg?
Good. It's
Yeah.
great to be back. Great to see you
Yeah.
guys. How's it
Likewise.
going?
Good to see you too.
It's going really
Yeah, yeah.
well. Yeah. I think you and I share a lot of probably similar mornings where it's a mad rush to get everybody off to school or
Yeah.
wherever they go.
It,
So
it, it, it's crazy. It's crazy. And no matter the effort you make to make sure they sleep a lot and things like that, they go to sleep late. They will wake up at the same time, 6 o'clock, knock on your door. Hey, keep me busy. Come on.
Like I
Get,
gotta sleep too.
yeah, my goodness. They do have a way to change the course of your day, like on a daily basis too. So it's a constant battle, but
yeah,
it's fun too.
it is
Yeah.
what it is, man. And for until the kids are off doing their thing, it is you know, your time is their time. Right? Come to realize that. So it's
Yeah. Self. It's there are two levels of self. I guess self-giving. When you have a significant other, and then when you have children, it's like
Mhm.
two levels of reckoning, right? So
Yeah.
the second level is just my goodness. At least the first level you can kind of reason a little bit, where the aspect of compromising shows up. And then the second one, I mean, you're at the mercy of funny logic, right? Their logic is so funny that you have to give in. Right? So they exercise this form of intelligence that is wrong, but you can't say no to it because you see it's an evolving one, and
Mhm.
and and you have to lean in all the time, right? So
Gotta
it's
lean in
fun
all
to
the
see.
time. It's just
Yeah,
fun to see. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Well, what's been on your mind lately, Greg? Besides
Everything, man.
kids, yeah.
Yeah. Everything. It's just a funny world we live in, right? So it's you know to me it's fascinating to see a lot of progress happening at tech, but also uh in for my generation. I mean, we have conversations about potential World War III. I'm like, what is this, like,
That's
right?
crazy, right? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what. Did you grow up in the '80s? I know Matt
Yeah,
and I are about the
yeah.
We
same age.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
So
definitely remember
back
this.
in the day, it was like half the movies we'd watch about as kids were like, oh, Red Dawn or some crazy movie like that, and I thought those were just relics in the past now, but I guess it's Back to the Future moment too.
I mean, I
So
grew up next to an Air Force base, so it's something we thought about a lot back
yeah,
then.
same. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's kind of like, how much stuff do we have to see, us the '80s babies, like, right? Even the '70s, like, man, so many like bad times,
yeah.
and it feels like it never stops, and
Just I always
we've
think
had
in
it
terms of
rough.
pendulums, right? There's yeah, things are strange too. If you kind of look back through cycles in history too, it's interesting. I know there's some, I call them chartists. They always look at charts and cycles in history. Ray Dalio being one of them. Turchin being another author that looks at this, but it's interesting kind of seeing there are in some ways repeated cycles, and we just happen to be in one of them. I know Ray Dalio hits on this, in
Hmm.
his latest book, where uh, it's just sort of the inevitability of how things go.
And
So,
it perfectly makes sense. Like, I remember reading somewhere where especially psychologists or philosophers mentioning that war is part of like nature's way of recycling, kind of thing.
mm,
But you would think that as we advance as a species, as we evolve, you would think that we'd get smarter and say there are some things that we don't not have to repeat, right? So there are ways to treat nature to prevent ourselves from going into something like war. I don't know. We'd be more intelligent, right? With our evolution, but I, I don't know. I don't know. We shouldn't be talking about that,
well, I mean,
right?
we
No.
shouldn't, but I mean, it is what it is. That's the,
Yeah.
what I mean. You can't ignore it either. It's just, but I'm curious to see like what comes out of this. Hopefully nothing terrible, and hopefully a lot of evolution. Tech tends to experience some pretty interesting inflection points during times like this, and maybe we'll see that. So
Yeah.
who
Yeah. Yeah.
knows? But I always try and stay positive in times like this, because it doesn't do you any good to
Yeah.
dwell and
Absolutely.
let it eat it. Especially, it's always Stephen Covey's like, circle of concern versus circle of influence. And you can be concerned
Mhm.
about a lot of stuff, but like, what can you control on your day to day? So,
Mhm.
it's,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Other than
interesting.
that, just like like you say, you know, having a positive outlook about the world, and you have to constantly be moving, constantly be doing something, right? So it's no longer enough to be good, right? You have to stay good. You have to
Mm.
continuously read. There's like tons of information coming at you, and you have to stay interested, even beyond what you do for your as your daily activity. You have to go. You have to take a step ahead and stay informed, stay engaged. It's just you know the world's out there full of data, full of resources, and I've realized more and more that you have a choice, right, to make the best out of it. But another thing that's hitting me too, like I'm in my late 30s. I, I really thought by the time I hit early 30 that I would have it all figured out. Like if you ask me this question right now, like what do I want as a long-term career, I cannot even answer that question, for example. Or what is this long-term, hobby that you want to catch? I
Mm.
cannot answer that. It's just constantly changing my mind. I'm still searching. I don't know how to answer those questions. And then in the meantime, I'm like trying to talk to my children to ask them, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? Right? Knowing that it will be something that I didn't even imagine before, knowing that it will be a surprise. It's just, we claim for assurance all the time and we don't know why. Right? So,
Yeah, I was literally just listening to a podcast just before we started here. It was Econ Talk. I listen to that almost every week, depending on the episode. But this one's on averting and adapting to climate change, and the discussion starts out just basically talking about how you can have all these predictive models about how you think climate change is going to turn out. You have no idea about the impact of what that's going to do, and
Well,
I think
because you're
there's
talking
this
about humans. How are
right.
humans going to react?
And there's so many. It's a dynamic system, so it's not like
Yep.
you can just say, "Oh, I'll push this button here and this will happen." It's not, a linear output in that regard. But I think to your point, Greg, it's also true with kids. Like, when I talk to my kids about what they want to do, I mean, they have no idea, and I'm like, that's probably the best answer, actually. Like,
yeah.
because the thing you can do is, I think, develop really good characteristics of a good person,
Hmm. Hmm.
whatever that means, as well as developing skills that you can transfer. I'm trying to get them into the mindset of like, you may have to move like internationally at some point.
Yeah.
And the world is a very big place, and you're competing against people everywhere in the world, whether you know it or
Correct.
not. And so, the only thing I can do as a father is make sure that you have the skills that you can translate no matter where you go. Like, don't get the things I want to stray from is like having a very localized set of skills where it's like, I know how to operate the, this thing at this particular company at this location, right? Like that's not scalable. And so I think the only thing you can do is just give them a set of scalable skills that can adapt to whatever happens next, because we can't predict that. There's no way. And
It's
we're
an
in tech.
interesting.
We're in
Yeah.
tech. Like, it's been interesting because I know,
Yeah.
this is all the stuff that we read and do. Like, and I know you, Greg, you're a prolific reader and post a ton of content all the time. But it's interesting because it's all future tech, or it's like cutting edge stuff. And so I would think of anybody who has a good opinion on this, it would be you, for example, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of like climate change, the way I understand it, layman term, is in the age of dinosaurs, or in the age where humans didn't have enough activities, you know, carbon emission levels were at a certain level where nature weren't necessarily mad. Like nature felt natural, if that's a term,
mm,
in terms of its recycling process. And then us came along and we started to manipulate things and change things a little bit faster, and that carbon emission went exponentially high. And this recycling job that nature does is kind of like, hey, wait a second, I don't have that much bandwidth to do that. Like we do the same thing happens with water, right? A lot of people say there's not enough water, but actually what's happening is nature doesn't have enough bandwidth to recycle it on time.
mm.
So the rate of consumption is bigger than the rate of recycling. So you're going to have a net negative there. So what climate change to me means is that how do we slow it down? How do we slow this? How do we create a negative effect of that exponential growth of carbon
Mm,
emission by, you know, going into other activities or moving into more eco-friendly solutions and things like that, which I'm hopeful for, right? There are a lot of development out there. Like we're talking about like nuclear fusion. Like I was reading about something where, you know, AI is learning how to control a nuclear reaction, right? Can you imagine you have this collider, giant collider in a circular way, and inside you have magnets that, you know, are controlling some sort of hot plasma that's very, very um, I would say reactive or very unstable.
mhm,
And those magnets to keep it stable, those magnets have to change, I guess, frequency, or they have to change their, yeah, that's it, frequency, I would say, like thousands of times per second. And this AI system learned how to change the magnets frequency like hundreds of thousands of times per second for just 2 seconds to show that it can take this plasma, or it can keep this plasma stable. So
mhm,
the idea of that is, you know, we're already thinking that there are some complex things that we'd like to do, but we don't have the capacity to stay 24/7 to
mhm.
maintain it. And at some point, there's a system that will perform that job for us. I guess now the question becomes, who will ensure the system that's going to stay 24 hours a day, keeping the nuclear reactor safe and
Mm.
alive? Who will ensure, how we will ensure that this system is properly maintained? So that's going to be another interesting question because, you know, AI will take over, but we also need to remain creative in terms of how we take care of AI as well, because it cannot be a non-control system. I don't believe so.
Yeah, and that's a whole other interesting domain, right? As AI becomes more powerful, what are the implications of that? And I think so far it's been, like, Joe, you've read this book, Weapons of Math Destruction. It's kind of been
Mm.
all these unintended consequences of basically people trying to make money. But I think we're seeing the next generation of AI, which isn't quite general purpose, but it's like more and more automation of things that humans used to do. And the implications of that aren't super clear yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing sort of the progression of AI as well, where, you know, there's been a lot of, I mean, a lot of activity in it since, you know, I mean, Turing, for example, and before, to be frank. And um, what I find interesting is, you know, it's definitely gone through several ups and downs. You know, now I feel like we're past, you know, hopefully more AI winters, but who knows? But what's interesting now is I think we've gone past the AI hype cycle to some extent. And now, you know, and you go through the trough of disillusionment, but that also means like the technology matures and then you find actual useful applications for it. I think to your point, Greg, that, you know, nuclear fusion reactors and AI monitoring, that's a perfect example of that. That's a very complex system for humans to manage. That is something where AI should, you know, be in the
Hmm.
loop.
Hmm.
So, you know, that's
Exactly.
pretty cool. I mean, it's controlling a process that's as powerful as many suns. That's
Yeah.
amazing, actually.
Yeah,
So,
it is. It is. It would be a great day. Like so, at this point too, I hope us, you know, our human nature doesn't show up too. It's like the company or the government who will be successful at this. How now that you'll have close to unlimited power generation capabilities, will we see, you know, electrical, you know, constraints, resources disappear, right? Will we fix, you know, the issues that's been hindering, you know, developing countries from going developed? Like something like access to electricity has been a big problem, like in a country like mine, like Haiti, right?
yeah.
Will we see that disappear? I don't know. This is another thing to see because we all know us as as a humans. We tend to, you know, I think equal distribution of resources is still something that I'm hoping to see happen. But but I'm hopeful for that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, consider all the wars that have been fought
Over
over
resources.
resources,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like you can make an argument that what's going on in Ukraine right now is part of it's motivated by resources.
Hmm.
That Russia thinks that they can basically choke off Europe with their gas lines and stuff. I
Hmm.
mean, to some extent, that's actually kind of true. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the difference for me in terms of the gas, I mean, it feels like there is limited amount of it, but now you have the nuclear reaction. Well, there's unlimited amount. So how are you going to restrict access to
mm,
everyone who needs it, right? So it
right.
would be a rough situation for whoever is going to be successful in delivering or in this technology. So
I'll give
interesting.
you an example too. Even in Wyoming, which is a state just a bit, I guess, northeast of here. They, when I go there in the summer, we have some land up there in middle of nowhere there. But on the way there, I drive past a power plant, a coal-fired power plant that's being decommissioned, and they're going to turn it into a nuclear plant. Apparently Bill Gates has this new technology, a new nuclear reactor, and he's building it. So and if that ends up being safe, then that pretty much solves the problem of having to dig giant holes into the earth to extract
I
black
know.
coal and like burn it. So it's kind of nasty stuff, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
We'll see.
interesting. Yeah, we'll see. What have you been some other things you're thinking about with future tech? I know you post a lot. What's been interesting, I will say as an aside, what's been interesting watching your progression too, because I know like for the longest time, I always associated Greg with you with AI ML stuff, but recently your content's been taking I think a turn for more diverse topics and more interesting things. Not to say ML's not interesting, but I mean,
Yeah, one thing I've realized over the past year was that even talking about AI only also can put you in a bubble, right? So uh, because there are much more to it, right? So once I start thinking about AI as a tool, then I can start expanding my curiosity towards some other things, right? Remember, you and I we were chatting like on our group. You
yeah.
mentioned something that rang with me, right? So I shared something about cloud engineering, and
Mm,
one of the comments you made was like, it's really running the world nowadays,
hmm
and it's a very important aspect of software development, right? So, we may think that, oh, AI is taking over the world, but you still need human creativity around software development and how we build systems in the first place and how they remain, functional over the cloud, right? So, those are things that have been gaining my attention a little bit more. I've been a little bit interested in how, Web 3.0 works, or
hmm
even NFTs and things like that. I do have a group that I volunteer in, which is Charlie Dow. There we
Oh
have a
yeah,
community of, yeah, like data
yeah. One of
scientists,
those guys.
analysts. I intervene as a product manager, and we come up with ideas. We not vote, but we kind of like, anybody can come up with an idea, and whoever is interested can form a group and let's go deep dive, right? Let's potentially develop something. It's more of an incubator, and then whoever decides to develop a product will spin out independently from Charlie Dow. And it's been amazing because one of the first product that we're going to come out with is an NFT analyzer, giving a little bit more uh, um, um, power to core groups developing, communities spinning out NFTs who have no idea how their NFTs are performing. Like they have no analytics running
Mm,
for their products. So in other words, we're giving them, you know, some eyes on the ground to understand, what should you deprecate, what should you continue to do, how can you grow your Twitter followers better, or who owns more NFTs in your group, like how are they keeping the floor price, which means, how much value do you think your community perceive your NFTs to be, couple things, couple fun stuff. And as we
mhm.
go, we'll use some sort of iterative process to make this report a little bit fun, better, more informative, and things like that, and hopefully expand it to a lot of communities who may see value to it. I mean, other than that, in terms of technology itself or AI, for example, I like to think about what happens beyond what we talk about, right?
Yeah.
Let's take like automated vehicles, for example. We all dream of this day, like when is it coming, right? Fully automated vehicle and things like that.
It was supposed to be here by now.
It was supposed to be here by now, exactly, or 5 years ago, right? For me, I try to think about, okay, what is it? What is that going to be like? The
Mhm.
conversations I'm not hearing is, okay, we'll have automated vehicles, but is it going to be one entity, one Uber-like entity who will own all these automated vehicles, and we'll move into a world of ride sharing ever, and I won't ever have to purchase an automated vehicle for my personal use? Or is it a world of both where you'll have, entities, Uber-like entities owning, or working with private owners of vehicles, right? So can I buy a automated vehicle like Tesla is envisioning, right? Something like I can own a Tesla car where I go to work, and then during the day, this Tesla car goes, you know, running errands, things like taking people for a ride, or and then you're making money while you're extra money while you're working,
Mhm.
something like that. Will we see, for example, the rise of, you know, what will the new Uber driver be like? Will they own a fleet of automated vehicles that they
Mm.
can serve, in a city, allowing, them to scale their profit, right? So it's going to be a fun way to see things. I know General Motors recently, the CEO announced that they will look into like family-owned vehicles that are fully automated.
Mm.
So it's going to be a fun thing to see there.
If it's going to happen, now would be a good time for it, right? Like cars are so expensive. I think a lot of people are
Mhm.
trying to look at alternatives like not owning a car at all. It's
Yeah,
just
if you just have like the
outrageous.
Spotify for cars or
Right,
something.
exactly.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
rent temporarily. It's funny too because we've gone through various like easy rental options, and those kind of come and gone. They haven't entirely gone away, but like in Salt Lake, we had an option like that for a while, and it disappeared.
What was the
Mhm.
option?
So basically, you could go. You look on your smartphone app, and there would be a car parked somewhere nearby. You'd walk to it, and then you'd unlock it, and you'd pay a certain amount to drive it for an hour.
Oh, which
and you park it
company
somewhere else.
was that? I remember
Yeah, was
that.
that like?
I know Canoe did something similar.
Yeah,
Like you could
Interesting.
like easily get an electric vehicle,
yeah.
and then with your phone, and your phone was like the OS that kind of actually helped it navigate, like where you would install the phone inside of the uh, on the docking station or whatever.
That sounds like a clean version of like GTA or something, the video game.
Just go steal the car and then drop it off
I,
somewhere.
I
when you're
have a
done.
subscription. I don't need to steal cars anymore. I'll
Yeah,
just
Yeah. So and then past what you see on the ground,
yeah.
then my mind goes, okay, what happens up there, right? So you have the rise of eVTOLs, right? So you have companies who are building like,
I
are you guys
was
familiar with
it was
eVTOLs?
it was Zipcar. That's what it was.
Zipcar in the
Yeah,
UK.
yeah. Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Hey Chris, how's it going, man?
Chris Sapp, yeah, he's awesome. Um, he's trying to get us all to go skiing pretty soon in December, which I guess is not pretty soon, but
Oh yeah.
he's like,
Just seems
come
soon
to
in
the
the
Alps,
current
we'll do a
world.
ski trip. I'm
The
like,
world is still standing. We'll all
yeah,
go
we'll
skiing together.
definitely go skiing at that point.
The day ski disappears, Chris disappears with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
We got to stop global warming.
Yeah,
so
one
it's
thing
just-
I've been looking at a lot though is an electric bike, because where I live now it's hilly. So riding a regular bike up that thing with groceries, if I'm running errands, it's going to be pretty painful. So I've been actively
Yeah.
looking at an electric bike, especially if gas prices continue as they are. That would probably pay for itself. Plus, it's just nice to not have to drive everywhere,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, but that's if you look at other countries, for example, I mean, scooters and increasing electric scooters are super common.
Hmm.
I know in Thailand that's becoming the norm. People are actually ditching even their gas, scooters for electric ones. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
but there are scooters like totally practical in a lot of cities there because
Yeah.
like driving a car there's absolutely idiotic. And that's the
Mhm.
same in bigger cities like Mumbai or or Delhi or whatever, where it's just traffic is crazy. So,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and you
Yeah,
want to reduce emissions.
electric bikes are definitely something that's going to be interesting. I like it. I like it for like small cities that are easy to navigate to,
Yep.
and that's actually built to allow bikes to circulate. I really like that. I think I can't remember which city out there that's like has adopted the life of bikes. I can't remember if it's a
Hmm.
town in Switzerland or in Norway or something, but there are cities in Europe that really push the population towards the consumption of bikes versus vehicles, which is makes gives it a clean aspect. I really like that. So I'm more of a small, nice, set town type of guy, not too busy, nice little historic downtown type of guy. So
Hmm.
with eco-friendly applications to it. So
And then
yeah.
trains to get between cities or
Mhm.
something like this. You could
Yeah,
take your
yeah,
bike on board, and yeah,
yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, but a lot of American cities aren't designed for that, unfortunately,
no,
right? So, like, I know in like Salt Lake, for example, there are definitely certain areas where it's just not bike friendly at all. Like, you ride your bike there, you're probably going to get whacked by a car. Like, and you try and walk even, and it's like that's a death wish. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they're fixing it, but that's interesting. Actually, Mike Nash has a question here. What's up, Mike? With a new fusion of technologies, do you think there will be new ML AI frameworks developed, and how do you see data architecture evolving? Um, Interesting.
So for AI ML frameworks and data architecture evolving, so I think uh, let me start with the data architecture. And not too sure what you mean by data architecture, but AI ML frameworks. I think it's going to be more of like integration with other things. Like I have this my next blog that's coming out probably midweek or so. I talk about this like where they're taking AI ML to improve something like traditional algorithms, like making it faster, right?
Hmm.
So there's another thing where you take AI ML to speed up databases. So I talked about that in the previous blog where you have vectorization capabilities of
Hmm.
AI to speed up search databases, for example. So there's going to be a lot of like combination of things. Like the traditional way of doing things now is seeing opportunities to leverage AI to be better, to achieve some sort of like efficiency gain and things like that. I can see it how vector databases will be like talked about over the
Yeah,
next
that's a
you know
new big area for sure. Vector databases.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, this is something Matt and I talk about too. Is sort of this concept of the live data stack, which we'll be talking about next week. A bit more depth, but I think the recognition that that I would say whatever you call the modern data stack, it just doesn't feel that modern anymore. Like it really feels like it's suited in a time and place, and it did a great job. I think that the benefit of the modern data stack is it really democratized and gave people access to data and data practices they just otherwise wouldn't have gotten. But I feel like the world's starting to move beyond that. The advent, the rise of streaming everywhere. Not that
Hmm.
it's been nowhere; it's been everywhere for a while. But I think it's just being more adopted. And
Hmm.
more and more companies, along with the rise of machine learning, you're going to see a lot more purpose-built technologies. And so I think maybe to answer the question, Mike, too, there's data architecture is evolving in that you're going to have a lot more kind of best-in-class systems, as Greg points out, vector databases, for example, like that's fully suited for machine learning applications, feature stores, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's just going to be more of the distinction is, it's going to be a more fast-moving end-to-end solution with feedback loops, though. So Matt and I think everything's going to go back to the application layer actually, and you're just going to have a lot of best of breed,
Hmm.
technologies that really complete the cycle of like fast analytics, automation, and then ML. Um, you know,
Yeah, and I think AI itself, like when you read like um some of these resources, like I don't know, Gartner or something like that, CB Insights, who say that at some point by 2023, 2030, AI will contribute to 13 to 15 trillion dollars in the world's GDP. So what does that mean? When I hear something like that, I say, okay, in order for you to do that, you have to create industry specific solutions leveraging AI, right? So it has to be a little bit more. intimate with the industry, right? So you can build a solution that is solely tailored to healthcare or gene, development, something like that, or automotive manufacturing, shipping. You have to really focus agriculture. They're gonna start creating like industry specific solutions to generate more value for a business. And then on the second end, you have the term of real time, right? The term of real time will remain somewhat, to me, it's going to be subjective, right? Us, in terms of
Definitely.
perception, how we perceive time, right? Are we going to see the effect of 10 milliseconds versus 5 milliseconds?
Mm.
Right? We won't see that effect. To us, it's going to be near real time, right? So, how do you define real time, right? Are things ever going to be real time?
I
And
guess
then,
the
yeah,
requirement would be I think maybe as fast as you need it, as fast as is necessary,
exactly.
right? So like high frequency trading, you're talking, as fast as you can,
Milliseconds.
right, or faster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's like,
yeah.
whereas if for your monthly, well, for your taxes, for example, that's just whenever you're supposed to turn it in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
Well, and fundamentally, anything historical is batch inherently, right? Even if you consume it out of a stream processor, it's still going to be batch.
but
And
it was
that's where the
created,
modern,
but
yeah,
it was created as a continuous data set at one point in
exactly.
time.
And that's the big
So
change.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I
yeah,
think new abstractions, though, that's really what's going to get interesting, right? We started with Kafka, and then we got things like Kinesis, and then the next generation of tools is going to make it way, way easier to like stitch together these pipelines into really complex interplays. Joe, to your point, like instead of just consuming off a single stream, you'll be joining streams, you'll be splitting streams, you'll be sending them in multiple directions. It's just still hard to do that right now, but as cloud engineering improves, it's going to get easier and easier, and then we'll see
Multi cloud streams and
man,
hybrid
yeah,
cloud streams. That's gonna be fascinating to
yeah.
watch. So yeah.
yeah. And the other thing I like to think about is, okay, now once we get better at doing those things you described, at serving things, in real time, merging batch streams and things like merging these live streams together, etc. What next, right? So I
Mm.
like to think about how do we go beyond that, because there's this constant need for high efficiency. But once you reach efficiency, what next, right? You'd want to say maybe another problem would emerge and will catch our attention, which feels like we're running in this cycle of, chasing the best of the best. In, we're letting demand guide us to the next, area of improvement. Like what will it be post real time, right?
Mm. Probably
Those are the things that I'm
something
thinking
involving
about.
quantum computing, probably. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
now it's like, oh, I just have various states of time. I don't even need to have one. I can, it's like,
yeah.
what do you want it to be? So yeah, that's interesting.
Exactly. So
Hmm.
those are
It's
the
trippy to
questions.
think about this stuff. I like nerding out on this stuff. Usually on my own when I'm on walks and stuff, just like thinking about this, and I have to get back to work, and then it's all about just data all day. But you know, I do like these conversations that it does force you to kind of get outside of your bubble in a lot of ways, because all of us have one, right? Like before, you and I were getting our kids ready, Greg, and it's kind of like that's it's the first thing is gonna be like, huh? So what are the consequences of like how do you go past real time in this situation? It's like
Yeah, what
it's,
what
it's
what
right,
comes next, right?
right.
We've been trying to solve this problem. Now we've solved it. What do we do next, right? So,
And Mike has a
uh,
good follow-up question. I mean, do you think real-time data drive advanced decisioning and automation may be? I would say unequivocally yes. Like, okay, so let's talk about like decision making, dashboarding, for example, right? So the modern data stack really
mhm,
focuses on analytics. I could make a pretty strong argument that a lot of the dashboards that you look at don't need to exist,
mhm,
because if you have automation handling those the actions you're going to take from those decisions behind the scenes, um, then you're already driving outcomes. And I have to question the use of some dashboards. Like, okay, sales is one thing. Like, you probably want to look at that, but there's other KPIs where it'd be like, okay, so even if you looked at that every day, like, what are you going to do about it if it changes?
mhm,
And if it
mhm.
changes, then why don't you just do something about it? and just automate that. And so I think real time really does facilitate the tightening of feedback loops between action and data.
Correct.
So, right.
Correct. I fully agree. And then the other thing I see too is there's us humans making decisions, but also you have IoT devices who will be ever interconnected. So in this case, they're generating what petabytes of data per day or whatever. Now, can we take all this data, put it in dashboards, and then us humans one by one make decisions? No, we don't have enough bandwidth, right? So advanced decision making should also be passed on to these systems, right? You build structure for them to exchange, communicate with each other, so they can make micro decisions, right, on a daily basis or even by the second, right? Automating the decision making and giving it to machines should be the next thing. And then another thing too that I see with these dashboards that's missing is that oftentimes it takes a little bit of time to know what to do after you assess the data on your dashboard, right? The time it takes to lead to that decision, right? How do you shorten that? Can you build dashboard that give you directions already generated the what if analysis for you, provided the potential outcomes with their probabilities and tells you, hey, do this or that. If you do this or that, those are the consequences or those are the trade-offs, et cetera, which shortens, in my opinion, the time it takes for you to go from insight to decision making kind of thing. So this is what I would like to see a little bit more when it comes to these,
So you're talking about a hybrid approach, basically, where it's not fully automated the way Joe was talking about, where it maybe simulates certain scenarios and then gives you a short list of scenarios to consider as a business leader.
Well, in that case, you're just training the algorithm, right? So it's like these are the kinds of outcomes that I want. So keep doing that until the data changes. And
yeah, because right now the way dashboards are built is that we make this what if analysis after we extract the insight from the dashboard, right? Can we train a system to do this what if analysis for us, right? And I've seen it too in car systems. There's a there are scientists who are studying how they can prevent like catastrophic outcomes in autonomous vehicles, for example, if you hack it, right? For example, you can hack it in a sort of way that is not easy for us humans to see, but the machine can detect it. So, for example, picture a autonomous car on a highway, and its system or its neural net is will be triggered by a certain frequency of trees on the road.
Interesting.
Once he sees that frequency, which is really hard for us and with the human eyes to detect, it is, its neuron will kick in to make a sudden right turn, for example. So to prevent that, what scientists can do is help the machine create some sort of what if analysis before making the decision. And that what if analysis needs to come in split seconds, right? If I turn right, what will happen? Right? Well, if I turn right, well, there's this separation in the middle. Or there's another lane of cars next to me. So if I turn right, there will be a catastrophic accident. So what do? Do I violate this right turn and keep going? Yes. If I violate it and I keep going straight, will anything bad happen? No. Then keep going. So those are kind of like what if analysis can really help. I've read about this one and I found it interesting that we need to go beyond just training on how to classify, but we also have to add a little bit of reasoning to it to make it work well.
That's interesting. Tor has a comment here, which I find interesting. Yeah. Hey, what's up, Tor? I haven't seen you for a while.
Tor, yeah. How's it going, buddy?
Dashboard should indicate deviations from expectations, either from ML AI or from people decisions. Numbers are a result of decisions. Tend to agree with this. One thing I would like to actually see more of is, I guess, sort of, it's something that's imprinted on me from forecasting. But so, what was your decision, and then what actually happened? What went into that decision as well. So these are certain things, because all too often, I think it's easy. It's kind of like Kahneman's, system one and system two thinking, where system one is sort of the default and it's very quick. it's a default that people have, right? But it's not
Mhm.
really well thought through. You're just kind of like looking at something like, oh yeah, going out whatever first comes to mind. But even if you made a decision like that, I guess it would be nice to know, what was the input. But I don't know. It's interesting. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Post decision making as well. Like, what happened? How do you track that result, right? Like, um, you get the insight, you make a decision, but also, you have to wait that full cycle until you get that feedback loop that this decision you've made has either positively or negatively, you know, affected the outcome you're expecting, right? So there's this cycle that you have to wait for, um, and
I
yeah,
mean,
it's
ML sort of does this automatically, right? I mean, that's the essence of training a model and retraining is you're trying to like minimize the error in the output, right? So, but for
yeah,
people don't do that. I would say people implicitly do this, maybe neurologically. I'm not a neurologist, so I don't really actually know what I'm talking about here.
yeah,
But it's also, but it's easy for humans, I would say, to also kind of retroactively justify things or invent uh, reasons for why things happened. We do this all the time. Like every one of us does this
Yeah.
yeah. It's
every
just that,
every day.
I'm thinking it's hard to hack lagging indicators when it comes to
Yeah,
businesses, right? You still have to wait for that cycle to
yeah, for
to go
sure.
through, and then say, okay, the decision we've made has a positive impact, right? So,
Hmm.
or oh no, this is not good, right? So
Yeah, it could take a while, and the thing is, it could manifest itself in very odd ways that aren't expected either. I mean, how often is it that you make a business decision and there's sort of second, third order effects of that decision happens all the time, or more likely, or I would say also the same, like other decisions that were not made by you have second or third order effects on your decision that
yeah,
you made
yeah,
that you weren't expecting either. So it just goes to show like how dynamic all these systems are. Like no decisions really exist in a vacuum.
that's true.
Matt and I always talk very probabilistically.
You
When we
really
talk
have
about stuff,
to.
yeah, like we're
Yeah.
never. I don't think Matt and I have ever been really this. I don't know our discussions have ever been discrete, right? Where it's very deterministically like, yes, there's a 100% chance of this. Like Matt and I are always like, yeah, it's probably a
Well, like pre-COVID, right? You were one of the COVID pessimists, Joe, before COVID made its way from Wuhan to the rest of the world. And it kind of, again, thinking of probabilities, like we don't know if it's going to spread, but what if it does? And what are the odds of that happening? And how is that going to affect your business? And how is it going to affect the economy?
Hmm.
And how does
well.
it affect politics?
Well, what the thing
Yeah.
that did it for me was, I mean, I was in Wuhan in December of 2019, passing through, and I saw, I mean, that's a big place. I don't think, Americans especially, I don't think we have an understanding of the scale of cities in China. They're enormous, and by
Hmm.
enormous, I mean like very enormous, like bigger than the cities here. And so, when you started hearing in January some reports, oh, they're starting to lock down the city, like that's and and by the way, they aren't restricting air travel out of there. Um,
Yeah, scary
it,
stuff.
you put two and two together, you're like, yeah, this ain't good. This is something like out of a zombie apocalypse movie or something. So you should probably, even if there's a small chance of something bad happening, you should probably get ready. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
so that's what we were doing back in January. And people were like, we're canceling conference trips. And everyone's like, why are you doing that? Like, this is, or they say, oh, this can blow over in a couple of weeks. Like, I had one friend who's like, oh, I'll bet you like $1,000, like, or 1,000. Yeah, this thing will blow over in a couple of weeks. It's like, I should have taken him up on like 100 or a million at that point. Cause I'd be like, like, you know, but people see, the thing that bugs me about things like this. And when you're faced with events that are very uncertain, I think people tend to have almost an overconfidence in their ability to determine outcomes, and they don't think probabilistic. It's very binary, like yeah, like yes or no, like 50-50, or like 100%, when really it's not that at all. So
but in the midst of things, right? So those who show this kind of confidence in taking this probabilistic approach, I believe, are represent like a small number of the population, because us overall, don't we act with more emotions than that kind of approach, right? I mean, how did we respond to COVID eventually, right? A lot of emotion went into it as well, and made us
mhm.
do some questionable things for the lack of a better word, kind of like in the sense of not caring about what the outcome would be and just not really following guidelines, or just taking the me decision, I do whatever I want kind of decision, which in my opinion is guided by emotion and the clear rejection of simple logic, right? So
Mhm.
I think the many went by emotion, and that's how I think good people who develop like great products understand that a lot of the things people do, a lot of the users, the way they use these products is mainly guided by emotions, right? So
Mhm.
that's
It's
what
emotion is sociological phenomenon too, right? You can have the best technology in the world, but until someone figures out how to sell it to people, to get people using it, the impact is going to be pretty muted. I mean,
Yep.
it took a long time, for example, for mobile phones to take off in the United States. They took off much earlier in Europe. When they finally did catch up in the United States, it became one of the biggest markets and it completely changed our society, frankly. But like it
hmm
was into the 2000s before that happened, and it was kind of the mid to late 90s when it happened in Europe. So,
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so I wanted to ask you guys. So I become the interviewer now.
Yeah, go for it.
Excellent. Okay.
Data warehouse, guys.
Yeah,
Like, what is the future of data warehouse? That's
that's a
one.
good
When I think
question.
about,
Yeah.
it's just I get stuck, right? Like,
Um, it'll look like a real warehouse. I'm just kidding. So no, it's an interesting question, and I think it's nuanced. Matt, you wanna take this one real quick? I think you have some ideas, and I got
Yeah,
ideas, but I
so
like your
so there are a
ideas.
couple of things. I mean, first of all, frankly, and this will make a lot of people unhappy. It always does, but like, frankly, the data warehouse has kind of replaced a lot of what Hadoop was doing just a few years ago, and that is a lot of heavy duty batch processing across a huge amount of data. There are certainly things that you would do with Hadoop or Spark that you can't do in a data warehouse that aren't suitable for SQL. But it turned out a lot of the stuff people were doing at scale was like fairly straightforward business logic, just done on a lot of data. I think the other trend we're seeing is that the data warehouse will become more real time. And we're seeing this with various like hybridized architectures where you have a stream coming in, you have a streaming buffer, and you can query that buffer at the same time that you query your historic data. That's not to say that the data warehouse is going to be the end all be all architecture in the future. There are lots of other tools that compete, do things that data warehouses can't do. But it's turned out to be a remarkably flexible paradigm. I would say that like maybe by 2010, a lot of people had written out the data warehouse for dead, like
Oh,
basically
they
saying,
did.
yeah,
I remember
yeah,
these
wow.
conversations. Like, oh, why do we need that? And then all people wrote SQL off for dead too. I remember those
yeah,
conversations for a
yeah.
few years.
And the conversation was like,
Interesting.
okay, we have this now, but give it 5 to 10 years and no one is going to have a data warehouse. They would even sign new contracts, but like, yeah, down the road, this is going to be gone. And
Yep.
then it's just made a huge comeback by
Mm.
modernizing the
Yeah, I mean,
technology.
shout out to
Yeah.
Snowflake.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you have the Snowflake
yeah,
shirt
I didn't
there.
wear this on purpose. All of our partners and vendors give me so many shirts. My wardrobe is basically, oh, that looks like a good color. I'll
And
wear that
what's your
today.
hat, Joe?
Oh,
You give a
this is
shout
from the
out.
Front Climbing Club, actually. So
If you ever come to Salt Lake.
yeah, no, their
Yeah.
logo is a plastic chair. It's just
Yeah.
become like emblematic of the. They have these chairs in the climbing gym there that you just sit on, and they look like this. But anyway, it's become like such a meme that they're like, oh, that's our that's our logo. But the data warehouse is interesting too. I think. I mean, short term, what you're seeing is there's a collision course of the data lake house, and data warehouse.
hmm
Functionally, I think these things are all going to be the same. They're both going to support unstructured, structured data. Um, not much of a difference there. But
hmm
again, I think the big twist is going to be moving away from a batch oriented world, which these basically support right now. It's not. Uh, like we talked about earlier, the world's moving, has been moving for a while towards the streaming first paradigm, and but the thing is that these companies know it. I mean, Snowflake's their real time team is among the best in the world at this point.
Mm.
And I know that Databricks and Spark and all these other vendors are working on Rockset, for example. They're doing some fantastic stuff. Druid, Imply, they've been doing that actually for a long time, but but yeah, what I see is definitely a move towards fast analytics, fast ingestion, and fast query results, as Matt pointed out. That's where it goes. Whether it's called a data warehouse, I think that's open for debate. There are some purists who say that a data warehouse can only be a data warehouse if it's Bill Inman's, 4 criteria of a data warehouse that he initially defined in, was it 1990?
But does Bill Inman say that? That's the question. He seems to have adapted quite a bit to new paradigms.
Yeah, he's interesting. I mean, if I were to think of one person who I really respect in the tech space, it's him, because he's written 62 books or something like that. I mean,
Wow.
we actually just
puts us to shame.
Yeah, yeah, he's interesting, and but what I like about people like him is he's still pushing himself, in new directions. I think that's really cool. So, but where it goes, and I think also, machine learning first as well. Right now, the warehouse is mainly an analytics focused tool, and I think that it doesn't. It's starting to play better with for machine learning, but I think it's only the beginning stages. And so again, it's just, but it's also this interesting thing where, when does it become a very monolithic platform, right? So that's sort of the danger. Is it one database to rule them all, or is it more of a point solution? Which, I mean, there's no shortage of point solution databases out there, and so it's. We had a single store on talk at our meetup last week, and that was, that's a database that does OLTP and OLAP really well together, and I think maybe that represents a future. I think the challenge for that is selling it to developers, because developers tend to think in terms of this database does this database does this over here. So that's
you believe at some point, like a data warehouse or some sort of data lake can perform both OLTP and OLAP to serve like customers' needs at some point? Is that even possible? A possible thing?
What do you think, Matt?
So the CAP theorem sort of prohibits this and sort of doesn't. And so I think what gets misunderstood about the CAP theorem is that you can combine multiple systems, right? I mean, that's exactly what you do with change data capture. You have a transactional system, and then you just feed downstream analytics on a stream. And I think what's going to happen is this process, especially in a cloud environment, will just become much more automated. In other words, you'll be able to, on AWS eventually, maybe AWS, other clouds, spin up a transactional database, and then you'll check another box, and you'll have like an analytics query layer. Now behind the scenes, that's some other technology like Redshift, and you're streaming into it. But you won't have to think about those details quite as much as you used to, unless you're like working at a company like Netflix that is doing very custom stuff with data.
Because they have to.
Because they have to, right? And for them, if you are the size of Netflix, you can save a lot of money by customizing. But if you're a small company, or if you're not a data specialized company, then you're just going to use these off-the-shelf tools to do the job for you.
But I think the other question too is what happens to roles, right? Like the jobs right now, I don't think are going to be the jobs that people are doing. Matt and I think extensively about this. So as technology becomes more abstracted for practitioners, that means you have a chance to kind of move up, upskill and add more value. Enterprisey data stuff is, I think, where our heads are at right now. Data governance, for example, providing more value to the business and all that fun stuff that right now it's getting better. I mean, it was better. I mean, Matt kind of alluded to the 2010s, and that was, I think, a time when there was a ton of machismo around just, running large amounts of infrastructure. Those days, there are companies that do this now. Like, you don't really need to do this. And so, but the abstraction is going to continue for sure. So it'll be interesting. I don't know what the jobs are.
Yeah, interesting time. And you did mention it too. It's like, what are those jobs going to be in the future? What would be the titles? What would be the responsibilities and things like that? But all of this emergence of abstractions keep making me think that software is going to continue to eat the world, right? So there's no slowdown. Like as much as you continue to have those abstractions, I mean, to me, it's software development that's going to continue to drive that, right? So when people say AI is eating the world, in a different way, yeah, you can say that, but still, without software development, you don't have AI doesn't have much to stand on top.
Well, I mean, and this is something I got inspired from David Deutsch, in his book, The Beginning of Infinity. But I mean, he has a really good point. I mean, there's the only thing limiting humans is really just the application of knowledge. But there's nothing to really stop humans from, say, doing whatever is within the realm of physics. It's just you don't have the knowledge to do it yet. But what this also means, and he makes a good point, and I've told this to Matt, but there's there's nothing in the world that, despite the laws of physics, if you violate those, you're off. But there's nothing that can't be automated, for example, with software.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I've thought a lot about this, and I can't find anything where I'm like, what couldn't be automated? And I'm like, probably nothing, as long as it doesn't violate the laws of physics. He's right. He's absolutely right.
That's an interesting way of
you
seeing it.
have you read that? Have you read Beginning of Infinity?
No, not yet.
You should do that. That would be a complete mind trip. This would be right up your alley, Greg. Like, I think you would read
Beginning
this.
of Infinity.
Yeah, by David Deutsch. It's good. Be prepared. It's a very dense read. It reminds me a lot of Gödel Escher Bach
Gotcha.
on that level, but you'll come out of it a different person.
That's
hopefully
amazing,
better.
right?
Yeah.
That's what I would like, right? So
Excellent.
yeah, let me just go ahead and mark it too. So.
I'll give a shout out to product as well. I think a lot of the interesting developments are going to come from the product side. And what I mean by that is that all these new technologies are developing. Actually, a lot of them have been around for a while, but people need to come up with interesting ways of using them, interesting things to automate, interesting ways of automating. That's what's really going to move the needle. So the technologies that are being developed today, some of them will sit on the shelf for like 5 years before they really get traction. And then someone will come up with an idea and like, hey, I can combine A and B and I can get C, which turns out to be really, really useful, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah. See, I was looking at this the other day because I was rereading the DevOps handbook for like the 50th millionth time, and that's reading through it. It's funny because if you just basically replace the words data with dev, you have basically the entire data observability tooling stack. You have all the data ops tools that are out now. Like everything I was reading through, like, site reliability, and I'm like, just replace the word site with data, and now you have data reliability. Which I have a friend who has that title now at work, and I think it's cool. So, but so a lot of these ideas can sit on, a shelf over here and be, or be used, right? But then it's just, now how do you reapply these things to new areas? ML ops is another area where you're seeing exactly the same thing. And I kind of joke that there's probably going to be Web3 ops at some point, and metaverse ops and all this other stuff, because it's like, with macro trends come reapplication of old ideas. I mean, nothing that's being done and data right now is entirely new. It's just basically reappropriating a lot of stuff from software engineering. And Ben Wilson, the talk we had with him on Friday, he's an architect over at Databricks, but he said, like, he brought up a good point. Machine learning is probably 20, 30 years behind software engineering. I totally agree with that. What are you gonna say, Matt?
Yeah, the other big trend is that infrastructure has turned into software. And so in other words, it used to be, I had to buy a cluster, I'd pay $5 million, I get 30 nodes, I'd have a certain amount of compute capacity. And now all of a sudden, I just write some code, Terraform up my cluster with 1,000 nodes that runs for 10 minutes, does a huge job, and then shuts down. That capability, giving that capability to small companies is potentially a huge needle mover if it's used appropriately.
Well,
right?
You mentioned small companies too, but that also gives them the ability to continue being small because you just automated a bunch of stuff. And I think small's, it's an advantage in some cases. I mean, so
that's true. That's true. Infrastructure as code has definitely unleash a lot of the capabilities over the cloud to companies and help them, scale and even do things more efficiently. And I think it's going to continue to change the way people do things and have access to a massive amount of capacity. One thing I like to hear about too, in terms of a solution, is what happens to all of these private computers sitting on the shelf with like, they're connected to the wire here, but they're not leveraging their computing power. Can there be a software out there that's allowing people to use this added, like, unused capacity from laptops or from desktops sitting in your house, not doing anything, not using computing power? You see what I'm saying? So it's an interesting thing to see too.
Well, the funny thing about this is that, I mean, I'm older. Joe and I are older than you, Greg, but like originally when the notion of cloud came out, when I started reading it about it was probably like the early 90s, mid 90s when I first heard the term. And back then, this is exactly what cloud was. It was the idea that you had all these computers and you could somehow couple them, harness them together to do interesting things. And we also had something called SETI. What was it, SETI at home, Joe? This is a thing that's been done.
Yeah, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Yeah. And what there was also that, and there was a protein folding app you could have gotten in the late 90s on your computer that did. It was like SETI and I always had that running. So But it's interesting, you know, and kind of bringing it back to Web3, what I find interesting is, to me, that's actually the true version of Web3 is decentralized computing, for example, these decentralized networks. It's funny because, you know, we know quite a few Web3 companies at this point, and the paradox of it is, yeah, they're running, they have a decentralized service sort of, except they all run on the major clouds like AWS or GCP, which is like the polar opposite of decentralization.
Yeah.
You know, you're paying the toll, so to speak, and you know, but the Web3 purists will be like, yeah, but we're trying to decentralize things and stick it to the man, and I'm like, yeah, except you know, you pay in the cloud tax to do that.
Yeah.
So,
It's a, it's,
what's that?
No, I was gonna say it's an interesting cycle, right? The mainframe was quite centralized, right? This big room with the first, computer system that was like a centralized thing, and then in the 80s, you saw everybody owning a computer, which was some sort of decentralization, and then you have the cloud that was kind of like a major centralization move, and then now you're hearing about Web 3.0 is going back to decentralization,
I
and
hope so. I mean,
hopefully,
I was on the internet before the browser, right? And I remember these days back, and it was decentralized to a big extent. You know, for a bit, there was a short blip where you had the information superhighway, which was going to be like AOL and, you know, all these services, but that sort of, you know, died on the vine, and then now you have kind of what you have. But I think it's the version of the internet now is not the version that I remember. There was a split second where it felt like this is some utopian thing, right? Like this,
yeah.
the internet was, you know, everyone could be free. I mean, these were, you know, this is a lot of the popular press back then, and now it's like, yeah, and it sort of reminds me. I mean, it's cool, but it's kind of like a dystopian hellhole at the same time. Like it's not this utopian vision that I had as a naive teenager growing up. I mean, I'd been on Usenet and the Well and all these places back in the day, bulletin board services. You know, these things. That was fun.
Yeah.
That was really fun. But yeah, let's hope it gets back to that. That'd be awesome. So I know we're coming up on time here too. Greg, I'd love to have you back on at some point. I feel like we just nerd out all day on.
I know.
Fun conversation.
Yeah,
Thanks for
awesome,
coming.
man. For the three people in the world who don't know how to find you, how would they do that?
For some reason, I think LinkedIn is the best place for
Don't know
me
why.
to interact to interact with folks, right? And you out there watching this, do join the exchange platform. I mean, at least watch for my posts on LinkedIn about my next blogs. My goal with this is to actually save time to people who are busy, who don't have time to click on every single article and read all of them. Some of them can be really long, so all I do is paraphrase or make the content a little bit shorter and more digestible to make sure that you stay informed. So it's a fun thing for me too, because I do exercise my skills of writing and things like that. So hopefully over time I get better at this as well. So but other than that, you reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm a happy camper, happy to connect and discuss. Thank
That's
you
awesome.
guys. It was
Yes,
awesome.
of
It's
course.
always
Yeah.
good to be here. I'd love to do this again.
Yeah, we'll have
Let's
you
do it
back
again
on for
sometime.
sure. Yeah. It's always quality conversations, and like I said, you're inspiring in the sense where I just I watch your content all the time and read it, and I'm like it's cool. You're just on a different level, I think, of like being prolific and being mindful and thoughtful about the space. It's cool to see.
I
So
appreciate you, man.
yeah,
Thank you,
awesome.
Matt. Thank you,
Yeah,
Joe.
cool.
Thank you.
Have a good
All
one,
right, have a
guys.
good
See you
one.
next
Thanks to the
time.
audience. And this Friday we have Lauren Ballack on the Friday show. We're going to talk about probably a recap from Data Council and other crazy stuff. The next week, it's actually just going to be Matt and I. We're going to talk about the live data stack. So stay tuned on that. So until then, take it easy, Greg.
Take it easy.
See you, brother. All right, take
All
care.
right, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.